All right, welcome to Two Sons Podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Hope all of you guys are having a great week. We have a very fun show today. We got some news. Some news about Kathleen Kennedy,
Yes.
the head of Lucasfilm, stepping down,
El
retiring.
Presidente.
Very, very interesting stuff there. I read an article from the Hollywood Reporter just about 15 minutes before you showed up that gave me some interesting kind of like insight on the whole situation that I'll share with you. And then we got a trailer for a show that I am incredibly excited for, season 2 of Andor. Effectively, like, it kind of feels like tying together like two loose end storylines and kind of like finishing a story surrounding some of our favorite characters and possibly my favorite Star Wars movie ever in Rogue One.
Rogue One, absolutely.
And so we're going to be talking about all that. I want to start with Kathleen Kennedy, though, because I think this is actually kind of connected in a lot of ways. So the facts that I got from the article, first and foremost, and I think I was genuinely surprised by this. First of all, apparently, George Lucas handpicked Kathleen Kennedy before selling Lucasfilm, and Disney chose to keep her in the seat.
Really?
I was flabbergasted by that until I continued to read the article, and essentially, because they're trying to decide who's going to fill that specific position.
Please say George Lucas.
And one of the reasons, yeah, exactly right. One of the reasons why Filoni and Favreau like don't want the job is apparently it's a job that doesn't really have much creative responsibility at all. Apparently, it's very much managerial,
like just running a business.
Yeah,
like it's same as running an airline business or something random, some huge corporate business. Yeah.
The way it was explained, like in terms of trying to quantify it in the article, was that it's 10% creative and 90% managerial.
That's so.
And
funny.
so I thought that was interesting because, like, I think this sort of thing does happen. By the way, we are culprits here, so I don't want to sit here and try to alleviate ourselves of guilt because God knows we've had our comments that we at Kathleen Kennedy's expense over the course of the years.
What?
For what?
No.
Us? No.
We're shills or whatever it said. Whatever they called us.
Oh, remember that one dude who said we're Disney shills? Let's be those again.
Yeah.
But like that's the thing. It was a lesson learned for me because this is something that happens in my industry too, where like people will comment on a situation without any real understanding of how things work. And then for instance, like I do, somewhere between 9 and 12 segments of a week on teams that are not the Lakers. But like, I'm going to hit the Lakers a lot. You know why? Because like at the end of the day, like this is my job and I have bills to pay and the company that pays me wants us to hit the top stories. And that's what I got to do.
Yeah.
It's a reality of the business that I can't get around. You know what I mean? And like, I could choose to just not cover the Lakers or talk about them very rarely, but I would like actively sabotage the performance of the show. And and I'm sure Kathleen Kennedy over the years has had to make a lot of decisions that she knew she'd get skewered for, or that came back on her that were actually decisions of the creatives that are beneath her. Now, where I would say the criticism is valid, and I'm curious to hear your take on this.
Yeah.
Is ultimately, if George Lucas handpicked her and she's strictly managerial and she handpicked showrunners who did a poor job running shows or a poor job or executive EPs that did a poor job making movies, she does share responsibility for that.
Right. No, I totally agree. Yeah. For some reason, I thought she was a little bit more in the mix with creative content, but even so, she's picking the people that are. And for Star Wars to be mediocre, which time and time again, it felt mediocre. It's just unacceptable. And that's easy for me to say from this little chair, and like, I totally get it. But at the end of the day, if that's still the case, I think she was probably picking the wrong people to do jobs for her.
Of course.
What it seems like. And like, I watched an interview with her, and it was during a Star Wars celebration, and she was asked like, what makes a good like Star Wars creator? And her answer was like the most lackluster, uninformative, like BS, like president of a company answer. And it was like, they have to be a person that has a story to tell. I'm like, you're kidding me. Like literally Star Wars is one of the most magical like franchises ever. Like it's its own genre almost, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not sci-fi, it's Star Wars.
Yeah.
Like literally it's its own genre. And that was like the best answer you could give. And it just kind of showed me like, I don't know. It just, I feel like her heart was never in it, really.
Well, to your point, like when George chose her, he chose her because he trusted her to pick the right people.
Mm.
And there's been this like clear delineation. Like I was reading the article and it's like, oh, you know, Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni have just become beloved by Star Wars fans. And it's like, no shit. You want to know why? Like, look at the stuff they've made.
Right.
And it's one of those things where like I think there was a good amount of like barrier to entry criteria that Kathleen Kennedy was considering when she was hiring people.
Which makes sense.
That was not properly accounting for basic things, which are like love and appreciation and respect for the source material.
Right.
And I think also, if there's something else to lay at her feet, it's the like kind of the incongruities. Like,
right.
For instance, like I really do think I can't remember her name. The
Leslie Headland.
Leslie Headland, who made The Acolyte, right? When I heard her in interviews, I really do think that she like loved Star Wars. Now
she had some Sith vibes going on.
Yeah,
that
like,
she liked. Yeah, right.
She clearly read the book. She clearly had appreciation for it. I will say that like I think there's a certain amount of like writing and like choosing of acting talent that was lacking in that as well. But like there is something to be said about the fact that there was no coherent plan through the whole process that allowed like you should have been able to go to her and be like, hey, take all the liberties you need within these defined 12 plot points. Just if you just do me a favor, storyboard it out, let's overlook it.
Right.
You know, but like she was completely handcuffed. And so like on the one hand, I want to be like pick better actors and actresses and like make better work. Yeah. But on the other hand, I want to be like, it's hard for me to be like, tell the story. Because where Kathleen Kennedy is right is like someone has to have a story to tell. Like there needs to be a media executive or a media, I should say, like a filmmaker of some sort,
right? Who's
sitting around somewhere like, dude, I got such a dope idea for how to tell the Revan story.
Right.
Like I could tell the shit out of a Revan story.
Yes.
Like I'm ready to go. I can do this. Like this is my idea. Let me sit in a room. Let me pitch it. Oh, you got Ryan Gosling? Fuck yeah, let's go. I got an idea.
Right.
Like she's right about that. But like at the same time, you have to give that person the bandwidth to actually execute that vision, and everyone feels handcuffed. Everyone feels handcuffed.
Dude, that's where it's so hard though, is because like we've asked to go from one singular mind of George Lucas to a bunch of minds, which, you know, are kind of this like conglomerate of what is Star Wars now, and it's just like it's so clunky. It does, and like I in some ways, yes, tell a story, tell your story, but the way that Jon Favreau does it with Dave Filoni is like they have so much respect for George's vision that when they did tell their story, they always stayed within the parameters of what they knew Star Wars was. They weren't trying to like create new Star Wars feels. They were trying to create new stories within Star Wars feels, if that makes sense. Like that's kind of a weird statement. Luceno does a great job of that too, where he's creating these new stories, but within the parameters of George's universe. And I've talked about this in the past too. Like I feel like a lot of the writers of like the newer Star Wars media are just trying to get theirs.
They're taking liberties.
Yeah, they're taking liberties that they shouldn't, and they're trying to put their imprint on Star Wars when Star Wars desperately does not need that. Like, again, like create a beautiful film like Rogue One, where you have stayed within the parameters of Star Wars, and people will love it, you know?
Well, and it opened up a whole new realm of storytelling, which has led to the Andor series. Like, literally, within the parameters of Star Wars, and I'm blanking on the gentleman who, because they actually used two directors on that film. They brought in a director to do all the reshoots, but they ended up like opening up a new storyline centering around this specific band of rebels with Cassian Andor. and like, oh, I have a Mon Mothma story, I have these other stories that I can tell, and it all kind of fits into this new thing. And now they're getting all this additional content that everyone cares about.
Right.
And like, so I think I agree with what you're saying, which is that like there are definitely people that took liberties, like J.J. Abrams, like they were listing all the potential potential people that could fill the spot, and like one of them was J.J. Abrams, and like someone like a source like quoted to Hollywood Reporter like, yeah, JJ's not going back there after what happened last time, like in terms of like the awful feedback he got.
Yeah.
I don't sympathize with J.J. Abrams.
No.
You fucked it up, dude. You fucked it up bad.
No.
Like in Rian Johnson, you fucked it up bad, dude. Like,
I think even worse than JJ.
Like you watched Star Wars movies and you saw the way that everything kind of was portrayed in terms of these like specific things, and you said, screw that, I'm doing this.
Right. For
like,
something, for the sake of something new. Just
ego.
novelty. Yeah, the ego.
Like, fuck you, man.
Dude, I know.
Like,
yeah. You have to, I think if you're going to, that's a really good way to put it, Jay, is I think if you're going to create good Star Wars content, you have to go in without an ego.
Yeah.
That sounds bizarre to say, but like, it's true. Like, and last pod we hit on this, but when Lucena was creating Labyrinth of Evil, when he was writing that book, like I brought up, he thanked George Lucas for always being available to ask questions about George Lucas's Star Wars universe. He wasn't just taking liberties and saying, oh yeah, this is how General Grievous came about, right? He's like, no, like, George, I want to tell a story. There's going to be this beautiful nugget about General Grievous and how he came onto the scene and his backstory. Like, what was it? Or even if George didn't have that already, he was like, hey, George, does this make sense in your universe? You know, that takes.
I'm sure he took liberties. Like, I'm sure they're like
to some, yeah.
Like, hey, like within these confines, I'm going to tell a story about this manipulative thing that Sidious and Plagueis did. But I'm sure he didn't run every plot point by Lucas,
I'm sure that at the end of the day, it was like, hey, does this work for you? Though?
Yeah.
And George could be like, yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't go against anything that like I've created so far. Like, it takes a lack of ego to be able to go to a superior and say, hey, like, is this good? Like, I feel that in my job all the time. Like, you know, a patient will come in and they'll be super ill, right? Or they'll have like a really unusual finding that like I've never seen before. Like, do you think the first thing I want to go and do is call up, you know, some seasoned doc, like ER doc on the phone and be like, hey, Dr. So-and-so, like, what do you think about this? No, it makes you feel like a kid, you know, and you hate it. But at the end of the day, it's like, no, that's what still needs to be done. Like, this is a difficult case and you haven't seen it before. Like,
yeah, and you need to shelve your pride if it's what's best for the patient. I remember when you were in primary care, you did that all the time.
Yeah,
leaning on the doctors that were more seasoned there, as you should have.
For sure, yeah.
Even when you, like, were 95% sure you knew the answer. Sometimes
exactly.
You'd be like, this person's life is at stake. I can't do this.
Exactly.
You know?
And like I think at the end of the day, like, the writers around Star Wars need to lose their egos and not try and make their imprint on Star Wars. Like, if you create a beautiful Star Wars story that feels like Star Wars, it's going to be around for forever. Like, literally in 200 years, hopefully, if the world still is here, like, you'll be able to view that and someone will be able to look back at that and think, oh my gosh, like, there's magic here. And then it's hard to describe, like, what makes Star Wars. Like, before I came over here, I asked Elena, I was like, hey, like, this was an answer that Kathleen Kennedy had. Like, I was super disappointed with it. Like, in your opinion, what makes Star Wars? And like, it's hard to put your finger on it. There's not one thing that makes Star Wars, but when you watch it and when you know it's one of the good ones, you can tell. You can always tell. Yeah, and that should be your imprint. That should be your goal.
And I will say, though, like, what I was trying to, separate is, I do think that all three directors, or the two directors for all three movies for the sequel trilogy, took liberties and screwed it up.
Yeah.
I like, when I look at The Acolyte, I think she did stay in Leslie Headland did stay in the parameters. Like, there wasn't, I didn't feel like she went out. There were some awkward scenes, like it was really corny when the witches were singing. There were clunky bits of storytelling. Like, it was painful in the last few episodes that they didn't reveal more about the Sith and some of those things. Like, it was just it. But I blame Lucasfilm for that. I blame Lucasfilm for that. Where like, there's all these different levels, because, like, again, you talked about how, like, what Star Wars is. What Star Wars is something that is kind of hard to mess up as bad as they did. And one of the things I always talk about in my NBA show is, like, every time something terrible happens with a team, where they like get their ass kicked or things go horribly wrong, like they get swept in a playoff series or something like that, everyone's so quick to like find the one thing to blame.
Sure, right.
And it's like when you underachieve to that extent, when you screw up that bad, it's almost always a confluence of like 5 or 6 different things.
Right.
Like they're like, oh, we couldn't take care of the basketball, we couldn't rebound, we didn't get back in transition defense, and nobody on our team can guard Anthony Edwards. That's why the Suns got swept by Minnesota. Like there's like different things like that happen. And instead of it just being like, oh, we got to trade this guy, he sucks, he's the reason why. Like that's where it can become problems. Like the Lakers, they trade Russell Westbrook and everyone blamed him for all their problems, and then they were still mediocre for 2 years because, yeah, Russ was a problem.
Right.
But there were other problems underneath it all. And that's really the thing is like when I look at how bad Kathleen Kennedy messed up this era, it comes down to a lot of different factors. It's no coherent storytelling. And I mean across platform. Like
correct.
There was no attempt to like be like, here's our framework. Let's fit these stories within this framework. That way each person knows you have this block of time. It needs to fit with these other things. But as long as it fits with these other things and you run it by our storyboard team, you're good to go. No one was given that freedom. The like basic rules, like no
physics rules.
No, JJ, you can't pop out of hyperspace between skyscrapers.
Apparently,
that's not
Disney
allowed.
needs a physics Star Wars guy where like everything just gets run through him. And he just says yes or no. Does that make sense?
I'll do it for free, man. Like, just text me. Just text me and be like, how do you feel about an escape pod that's a coffin?
Yeah. That's like shooting out of the nose of the Millennium Falcon.
Like, I'd text back. I'd be like, we've seen so many other escape pods that look so much more practical.
Let's do better.
Or like,
lobbing laser bolts.
Like 10 minutes into the first Star Wars movie, they told us you can't jump into hyperspace without making sure you won't run into anything. You can't pop out of hyperspace in the middle of skyscrapers. Like,
doing it 17 times.
I would literally just take Rian Johnson's text message and I would just like screen. I would like screen record like a laser bolt and just send it to him and just not respond.
This
in
is
any
what a
other
laser
way.
bolt is.
It just get the fuck out of here,
dude.
Man. Like, what are you doing?
I'm going through Thrawn books right now. Can you imagine if there's lobbing laser bolts in the Thrawn books, and how disappointing that would be if all of a sudden Thrawn had to think of a way to get around a lobbing laser bolt? That'd be the lamest shit in the world.
Every time I see the lobbing laser bolt scene, I always just imagine like someone like popping in from hyperspace, but like at a different like angled vector to where they're like upside down, and the laser bolts just look like they're scooping up for
no reason
at all. It's just it's so dumb.
Yeah, it's so easy to not mess that up.
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's so easy. It's like this is the low bar. This is what I mean by the low bar. It's like egos trying to put their own stamp on Star Wars and shitting on all the source material. Right. It's like no real coherent plan with the storytelling. It's like, hey, there's like a baseline with movies where like even if the story or even if like some of the action doesn't come together and some of the big picture connectivity to other movies doesn't come together, like if it's just well written and well acted, it will be good. Like if the conversations are riveting instead of boring and substanceless, like those are the things that matters. And so like the bottom line is like you can say she's not a creative, you can say all these different things, but the truth of the matter is she was the one at the top. And way too much shit slipped through the cracks, and it was a disaster. And she does deserve criticism. I think the criticism though is geared. I think it doesn't have to do necessarily with her love of Star Wars. She just did a bad job.
She just did a bad job. So she did such an average job that it equated to bad. You know what I mean? Like if we didn't know what Star Wars was. And if we watched those movies, we'd be like, oh, this is pretty sick. You know, like, actually, I think I would have liked it if I didn't have this perception of what I thought Star Wars was. By the way, and this is not a fan issue. People make the new era of Star Wars into a fan issue, saying that, like, we're completely unreasonable and impossible to make happy. That is not my point.
Oh, well, but it's the anti-woke people. Like there is this idea that like everyone that dislikes what Kathleen Kennedy has done is like this crazy super far right wing like anti-woke person. It's like no, most of them are just guys like me. They're like these movies suck. These movies suck.
Exactly.
Like, these shows suck. You got to do better.
You're right. No, you're totally right. And I would have liked it if it was new to me, but it wasn't new to me. Like, there was this framework that George had set up beautifully and painstakingly. He created an entire government that you and I have spent hours reading about.
Yeah, and dissecting.
Like an incredibly complex, beautiful, complicated universe, right? And like it was missed, and like having average Star Wars content is not good. That's bad. Like, it's like the F1 Red Bull team all of a sudden getting 7th every single race. Like, that is so average and so unacceptable for that team.
No, absolutely. Like, the average way you put it, what you put it about being average is the best way to put it. Because, like, I, as a Star Wars fan, have enjoyed a lot of these projects. I enjoyed the Acolyte.
You and I we got roasted for that, I'll stand behind it. Like, The Stranger was one of the dopest Star Wars characters I've ever seen.
I've rewatched Episode 5 like 3 or 4 times. But the point is like, it had an opportunity to be something like truly epic. And it just kind of fell flat. And like Mandalorian season 3 just like kind of fell flat for me. And like the Book of Boba Fett just kind of fell flat. And like I actually really enjoyed Ahsoka. And like there's a certain amount of like there are some like to the point of these. There are some like miserable, insufferable, never will be happy Star Wars fans.
Right.
And I'm not one of those guys. And like my thing with that is like you can't focus on something I've learned from being in media for a while now, like, and I'm at a much lower level, but like in this space, you cannot escape the awful portion of humanity that is very loud on the internet. Okay. Like, so like, yeah, you're right. There is a large pool of trolls that are shitting on everything you make, no matter what, and that are zeroing in and all. They do not actually represent Star Wars
they're
fans. Like,
super loud, squeaky wheels.
Yeah, exactly. Like, we've done on my show this month, we've done like 1.5 million views in February. I have hundreds of comments of people saying awful things about me. Right. Hundreds of them. But like,
ridiculous.
What are those hundreds in the scheme of the 1.5 million or 1.4 million people that have watched the show this month? Yeah. Like, it actually only represents this like tiny, tiny, tiny loud segment of fans. And so like, I'm not really worried about them. Like, the people, those are the guys that go to Rotten Tomatoes and flood the reviews and do I didn't take time to go write a review on Rotten Tomatoes, and most of you guys didn't either. Like, that's the thing, is you kind of have to like separate it from that. Like, we are not asking for perfection. What we're asking for is like a level of reverence that hasn't been there. And if there was an error in Kathleen Kennedy's judgment, it's that the people she brought in were more reverent to themselves than to the source material and to what it means.
Beautifully stated.
And like the people that have done really good work are the people that are reverent. And like, I understand that it's complicated. We should probably like to transition. Like in the article I read, like one of the sources to the Hollywood Reporter said that they think Dave Filoni is going to get named, but like apparently they don't like. It would be an awful job for Dave because he would be better served in a creative position. Sure. John Favreau apparently doesn't want it either. There's a bunch of different people that they could. Apparently, the issue is that there's not really the right person there to take this job.
I totally believe that. Yeah. Like, we see that in politics, and it's just like no one really wants
to do this.
Yeah, no one really wants this, right? No, dude, even in like my line, they're like, hey, like, who wants to be a med director? And everyone's like, not me.
Carly was telling me something like that. Like, you got offered a management job, and you were like,
I was like,
no,
absolutely
thanks.
not. Like, no, I'm not going to get called at 4 a.m. about a medical assistant throwing up and me having to like scramble to fill a
coverage,
a body.
Yeah,
like,
it's not what you got into the job for.
Yeah, exactly. I want to give care to people. So like, yeah, like you'd almost be crazy to want this job. I do think John would be dope. Like, I think that would be really cool.
John, I think, has some. John is more experienced on the management side than Dave is too.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. My thing is like, I think John makes good movies and shit. So like, I think that like he's kind of they were talking about the Marvel guy, Kevin Feige or I can't remember how you pronounce it, but apparently he's got his hands full with Marvel, but like they've considered him.
Dude, I hope so badly they don't go there because Star Wars is not Marvel.
No, I know, but I'm not. But it's not the creative side.
You're right.
More
But it's just
like
you wonder if that.
Of course.
If that,
we're all scarred.
Yeah.
We're like, ooh, this guy's gonna fuck it up worse.
Right. Like, dude, we're all so worried. Just bring back George. No, just kidding. Obviously, he wouldn't be able to handle this job, I don't think now. Like,
No,
it's not the same job anymore.
It's not the same job.
Yeah.
On that note, we can actually talk about one of the few Star Wars projects under Kathleen Kennedy that has been universally liked by critics, people like us, and even the dregs of the internet that seem to have liked Andor. What did you think of the trailer, man?
It was gorgeous. Yeah, like, so season 1 was pretty subdued, very dark, very monotone, but in a really cool way. Like, it was talk about a new take on Star Wars. It was a new take on Star Wars that stayed in the confines of Star Wars, right? Like, it was just down and dirty, and I liked that. If you had to just judge Andor 2 by the trailer, it seems way more upbeat. Like, they have this really cool rock song going, and they've got a ton of very diverse clips that happen where like it seems like you're just going to get like a plethora of different parts of the universe in Andor 2, and I'm really excited to experience that.
Yeah, one of the things that was great about Andor was that it was dark. And like, they didn't show much of the darkness in that trailer. The trailer was very much, it almost felt like a celebration of what Andor is, because it's like got this vibe, and it's like, here's all the critics talking about how amazing it is, and like, here's some kind of upbeat parts of the show, which was kind of an interesting characterization, because again, like, what set Andor apart was like, one, good storytelling and acting, which is like the baseline of any sort of good piece
Diego
of visual
Luna
media.
is incredible.
Is amazing. But the other piece of it is like, it was the underbelly of the rebellion. It was very much like, these are the people on the ground, so to speak.
Yeah.
Not the Jedi, not these like super powerful beings that are dictating the terms of the universe, but like on this like really ground level, not even just for the rebellion, but it shows it with the Empire. Like, and we're going to get like, cause we got to see a lot of the ISB. We got to see a couple of specific ISB characters. That dude who was like working for that like third party that was under the Empire, who ended up going to work for the ISB. There's they're bringing in additional characters like Director Krennic is going to be in it. So like that's cool to me. That is an interesting part of the show, is that you get to see like these like boots on the ground types that are fighting the rebellion, not Han Solo and Luke, Darth Vader,
just floating around being heroes.
Grand Moff Tarkin, yeah.
One of, I think it's the first episode of season 1 of Andor. Cassian, our champion, our hero, literally shoots a guy in the face point blank with a blaster.
Dude,
because
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, because he accidentally kills a guy because they're about to jump him, and then I think he pushes him off, and then the first guy ends up dying somehow, like he hits his head or something like that. And then Cassian just murders this guy in the street by shooting him in the head right in front of his dead friend. And like that's
forgot about that. I need to rewatch season 1. Man.
Dude, it's incredible. Like, so like that's our hero, and you're right. Like the underbelly of the rebellion is exactly how that should be put. But I think we get to see K2SO's story as well. Like he's definitely
how they get
in
it.
Yeah, how they get him, dude.
Yeah, it's gonna be sick. I'm hoping for there's a bunch of cameos from like people from Rogue One who died that are like earlier on in the rebellion when they're fighting. I'm secretly hoping for an Admiral Thrawn like cameo at some point during the show. It just feels like low hanging fruit, because like, there's always the part of us that'd be like, oh, it'd be so sick if like there was an Ezra or a Kanan or an Ahsoka or something like that. But like, Andor very much has been kind of deliberately avoiding the Jedi, the Force, the lightsabers, that sort of thing, because they're trying to focus on the dregs. But what would be awesome in that fit is specifically Admiral Thrawn. Like, it'd be really cool if there was just a couple of little drops there. There's also just a ton of flexibility surrounding the 4 different storylines. And this is going to be interesting. This is going to suck for us, because like we were hoping that we'd be able to go like episode by episode with you guys, and like maybe we could try to do that to some extent.
Don't sleep for one day of each week as Andor gets released. We'll just watch a show, do a pod, watch a show, do a pod, watch a show, do a pod, and then like sleep 2 hours and then go to work.
We're gonna do the best we can. But like, these 4 different arcs that are set in 4 different years gives you all sorts of like freedom to tell different stories and to bring different cameos in. You could have Admiral Thrawn have a brief appearance in the second arc, but like not appear again, or or like different things like that. But I have a feeling it's just going to be. I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit all over the place, but I almost think it's going to have a feel like Tales of the Jedi or Tales of the Empire, where like we actually kind of like getting these shorter stories that have like closure.
I see.
And then they go tell the next one and there's closure and like that sort of thing. I think it could work. I'm curious about it.
I think it could work. I think there's in this season in particular, just because of all the content that's going to be dropped, I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. Like, I think it's good for podcasts like ours, like for like where we're going to actually have like a lot of substance to actually break down. Because you and I would do like Tales of the Jedi and be like, oh yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and then it's over. And then it's over.
Yeah. But like in this, I feel like there's actually going to be some theorizing that can happen, and I think that there's going to be a lot of like deeper level content to kind of flush out and talk about.
Yeah,
for sure. Especially when you start to talk about large projects like the Death Star and how that relates to like Jyn Erso and like her dad, and like you talked about Thrawn and anybody who knows anything about Thrawn knows that Thrawn was opposed to the Death Star, right? So like there could be a lot of like big underlying themes that could be really interesting there.
The Death Star piece was something that initially stood out to me in the trailer because there's not really a whole lot else that's revealed. Like you see kind of a hangar bay where presumably Cassian's just messing things up in a TIE fighter. You see some like hit and run type stuff, bombings and that sort of thing. You don't really see any like definable other environments except for like a weird Chandrillan like dance party.
I know. It was like very like 70s, like kind of like had this like 70s, like how like people were like very anti-government then.
Yeah.
It's like F the man, like love not war vibes, and like I feel like they're definitely gonna go for love not war vibes there.
Well, in that way the music was perfect because it's like the revolution starts now.
And then like Vaughn like puts her hands up.
It's kind of everyone's party.
I know, and like they like pan. There's this dead body that's laying on the ground, and then they pan up, and then there's two X-wings like lifting off. Dude, it just looks cool, man. It just looks cool.
The Death Star, though, I think is going to be an interesting story arc because like I think they're going to be diving. It's earlier on in the project than Rogue
very
One.
early,
and I think that could be really cool as they dig into like supply lines, Grand Admiral Thrawn's differences of opinion in terms of the actual construction of the Death Star. The like the rebellion the thing is the rebellion discovers the Death Star at the beginning of Rogue One, from what I understand from the pilot who defects.
Yeah, the pilot.
I don't think they actually knew about it before then.
I think you're right.
And they might have, and I can't remember. I'd have to rewatch.
No, I think you're right,
One.
dude. Well,
but if that's the case, because the only thing that would push back against that specifically would be, they do have like this desire to go rescue Jyn Erso from prison, but that could have come from the pilot too. But I'm just curious to see what they do with the Death Star because that could be a really, really interesting, interesting little bit of espionage, or it could literally be how they discover the Death Star, initially or something like that.
Supply chains have always interested us in regards to the larger Star Wars universe, and like I even think of this is super deep. So if this doesn't make any sense to anybody, like that's okay. But in the first book, Night Swan, and how essentially this like great mind in that of Night Swan is kind of discovering that the Empire is building this massive behemoth of a project and he doesn't know what, and he ends up dying
before he could find out.
Exactly.
But they found out he was involved with like the rescuing of the Wookiee slaves. Like we could have a Wookiee slave ship that shows up. That's something that we haven't seen in live action yet.
And I think that is still plausible in like I'm sorry. So I think it's plausible for Disney to do that even for a non-Star Wars buff. Like I think people would still understand like, hey, there's a secret project. Like everyone knows what the Death Star is, like, and how that could use up resources. And I still think that could be a really interesting storyline. Yeah.
Well, and again, like I'm so not worried about that because it just comes down to storytelling. Because like again, like what happens when you go see a movie, like a mystery movie? Like you start watching it and then like little bits of plot get dropped in front of you and you start to pick up. Like you're always starting from ground zero with a new movie. Like
for sure.
They don't necessarily have to, with acting, with good conversation, with good writing, you can make it digestible for casual viewers.
Exactly.
It doesn't have to be like super well drawn out in advance, so to speak. But
no.
yeah, I'm excited. There's just so much opportunity for like additional space battles, for additional, like I'm hoping that they show some of the early confrontations between the Rebellion and the Empire. I think that would be fun. I think there's a lot of opportunity here, and some of my favorite characters, Cassian Andor, Mon Mothma is just she's probably the most perfectly casted character in the history of Star Wars. She just nails it, man.
I totally agree,
dude.
Yeah. She's got it.
Yeah,
she, whatever it is, she has.
Yeah, well,
sure.
she embodies everything that Mon Mothma was. You know.
Yep.
But yeah, so yeah, I'm gonna be rewatching season 1 with Carly. So we'll probably do another episode between now and then where we talk Labyrinth of Evil, where we talk there's a bunch of Labyrinth of Evil stuff we can get into. We won't do it today, but we'll hit some more Labyrinth of Evil, some Andor rewatch stuff, and then once we get into April, it's go time. We got lots of shows to get into. And
that's right.
Did you have anything else you wanted to get into today?
No, dude, I think that's it.
All right, guys, as always, we sincerely appreciate you guys for supporting us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks a lot.